councillors, welcome to the media and to staff and any members of the public. We will commence this meeting of the Economic Development Standing Committee. We have no public forum requests for today, so I'll move to apologies. An apology has been received from Mayor Dave Cull, and I'll move that that apology be sustained. Thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Good timing, John. That brings us to confirming the agenda. In regard, I'll move that the agenda be confirmed, and in regard to Standing Order 21.1, Option C be adopted in relation to moving, seconding and speaking to amendments. Seconded Councillor Gary. All in favour? Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any changes to their declarations of interest? If not, I'll move that the committee notes, if necessary, notes the interest register attached and confirms the proposed management plan for elected members' interests. Seconded by Councillor Lord. All in favour? Against? Carried. Now into the substantive stuff. We have next Fraser Liggett going to join us, and we will deal with Enterprise Dunedin October-December 2017 activity report. Welcome, Fraser. Do you want to speak to the report first?
Just very briefly. This is Enterprise Dunedin's second activity report, and very briefly, the purpose of the report is to update the committee on a number of work streams that have been progressed over the last quarter. The report takes account of 4 activities that have been summarised within the document, and probably at this point, I'm happy to take questions in conjunction with Mr. Christie.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Liggett, for the report. I've got 3 questions. The first one is on page 17. Can you tell us about why we're using a Wellington-based incubation service and the benefits of doing it? What will they be able to deliver beyond what we have to date? So that's my first question.
Creative HQ has been identified by Callaghan Innovation as a particular model that may be rolled out across the country. So in effect, Callaghan is piloting the Creative HQ service within a number of regions across New Zealand. So we've looked at it over the last few months in conjunction with our existing startup support, particularly through Startup Dunedin, and we've identified that it can meet a need within the startup community in the market. So we've done our due diligence, we've looked at the model, and we believe that it's a good option to also receive some support through Callaghan for the delivery of that service within Dunedin.
And my second question is around Study Dunedin, and I was interested in the 4 key work streams. How different is that focus from our current focus?
Over the last 12 months, Study Dunedin's been looking at its activities in terms of the way that it supports and attracts students to the city. It had taken more of a project-based approach, a series of initiatives, which included outreach and marketing offshore. The group, or the Study Dunedin Advisor Group, has actually spent some time over the last 12 months actually reiterating the value proposition around Study Dunedin and looking at the best way that particular model can actually support students, to attract students to the city and support them within the city. So we've probably moved away from being more of a doer to an enabler. So we support secondary schools and also the tertiary institutions, perhaps going offshore, but actually trying to develop a program where we can better support students onshore when they arrive to the city. So it's a fundamental shift in terms of moving away from project-based approach to more of an onshore sort of focus in terms of supporting students.
Thank you. And through the Chair, can I ask a question outside the scope of the report, which is to do with activities, ED activities? So my question is to Mr Christie, and it's been something on all of our minds over the weekend. And my understanding is that far from immortalising an overseas musician or far from somebody's music taste or a flippant use of ratepayer money, that there's a very solid business case for why we now have an Ed Sheeran mural in Bath Street. And so I'm interested in the business case, and also can you give us some comparisons, because I think this is really important for our community. We deal with sometimes eye-watering amounts of money, and you know, when people are on unlimited incomes, they look at the amount of spend and wonder about that. Can you talk to us about what $8,000 would buy in terms of advertising?
Yes, certainly. So thank you for the question. The Ed Sheeran street art was part of a much wider piece of thinking that our marketing team did around how we could make sure the city was in the best possible place it could be around city activation for what are 3 very significant events over Easter weekend. With 110,000 tickets sold, we wanted to give people the opportunity to engage with social media. And one of the ideas we had from our marketing team with the help of outside consultants was to look at a piece of street art that would give people an opportunity to come along and take photos and to share that across their networks. So it was about how we engaged with our community in a marketing sense. We have no set views on whether that street art should stay in place past the Ed Sheeran concerts. I guess that's a discussion for the future. But we thought it was a very unique way of being able to get some of those key messages out to some of those audiences. In terms of what the equivalent spend would be, I guess you could look at something like a billboard advertising, which would be in the sort of same realm of spend for a lot less time, potentially markings on fields for rugby games, for example, can be in that order. So we're talking about similar figures.
Thank you for your answer, and could you take back my congratulations to the team for their innovation. I think it was bold and creative, and I look forward to the results.
Thank you.
Thank you. A few questions. One is around the Provincial Growth Fund, and it's just putting the parochial question, I suppose, in asking why, rather than putting forward proposals within our district, the focus appears to be on doing region-wide stuff. Is it because having more rural councils involved, you reckon that'll be a stronger play, or are you trying to capture Mark Patterson's place, or?
Not at all. There are some areas of collaboration that already occur across the region, which we believe have benefit for both the city and the wider Otago region. There's things such as Film Otago Southland, where we're all signatories to and supportive of an organisation that promotes Otago as a destination and also promotes the sector for the film industry. The second one is around the Regional Business Partner Program, where we believe that there's strength in terms of obviously supporting a range of businesses across the region. It's a contracted service. What we've been simply asking is understanding whether or not there's any other areas of commonality where it makes business sense for both the city and as a region to actually look at options or collaboration within there. Nothing more than within that. The Provincial Growth Fund in some respects is related to that, but slightly separate. There can actually be, as you say, a good degree of parochialism in terms of actual individual projects that can be put forward by individual councils. The guidance suggests, though, that those projects will be looked on more favourably, though, if there is a degree of strength or support from the wider region, though.
And and I understand it's an annual, it's $1 billion a year, and there are there'll be different rounds of funding allocated. How advanced are any of our proposals, if at all, and before they are submitted, is the idea that they'd come back to this committee for endorsement? Yep. Or yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been trying to get ready for the Provincial Growth Fund. I suppose that's the first thing, and hence why we were doing work before Christmas, after reading some of the signals that we've received from the new government regarding the fund. It's a 3-year fund, there's no indication that it's going to continue beyond the 3 years, and so we're just conscious that we need to do some upfront thinking around what's the potential investments that we could actually look at attracting within there. So
Early
yeah.
days. Early days.
It's moving, so, and we will come back. We realise we need to bring that back to obviously to this committee.
Yeah,
as well.
cool. I look forward to it. Just two more. One is on the regional business partnership stuff. Just
Yep.
the comparative figures in para 9 between where we're at this year versus where we're at last year, and those seem to be down. But are you confident in terms of the number of engagements that we're still going to hit those targets by end of June?
Yeah, look, the table, and forgive me if it hasn't come out entirely clearly, we have an annual target that is set by the regional business partner funders, which is Business New Zealand, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and Callaghan Innovation. So we have an annual target. We've just broken that down to a year-to-date target again as well, and a year-to-date actual. The majority of the performance indicators we're actually overachieving in that sort of space. We still just need to keep on obviously focusing on the activity to make sure it keeps up there.
Thank you and apologies for my poor reading of the dates across the top of that box. And just the last one's just in para 22 around the University of Otago Accommodation Office. Is that trying to organise groups to use colleges outside of the semester? What does it mean by using the university's housing stock for short-term education groups?
So the university obviously has its own range of housing stock within there. We're aware that there's, and there's certainly been discussed within this committee regarding accommodation challenges, just given the finite supply of accommodation within the city. It's a piece of work that the university and the Polytechnic is beginning to explore, and we're really encouraged to see that the Polytechnic's actually commissioning a piece of work to look at accommodation specifically. They've looking at over the next few weeks to get that progressed very, very quickly. So we want to unpack all of those issues. So we're working with partners such as the Accommodation Office or in the International School as well as the Polytechnic regarding that.
And from the demand side, is that covering the needs of staff as well? Because I know that rental accommodation that a professor might want to use is potentially in short supply in the city, and that can be an issue for attracting staff.
That's a good question, Councillor Hawkins. We'll double check within there again as well. I think certainly it's student focused, but I can confirm whether or not that includes staff.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Liggett, for the report. I'm referring to paragraph 5, also the Provincial Growth Fund.
Yep.
And I note that it's one of its purposes is to enable Māori to reach their full potential. Mm-hmm. So what collaboration do you have with either the local or regional rūnaka?
Look, this is probably the areas that we still need to explore. While I was saying that we've been doing work before Christmas, it's about getting ready, and we're absolutely assured that we need to get our stakeholder engagement and involvement and participation within these projects established. One of the useful things that's happened is having a member of a project team that's been established who's actually gone through a similar process, and so we're conscious about learning the lessons within there. And how to do this effectively.
Councillor Lord. You're up.
Sorry. Hello. My question was regarding paragraph 4, the 10,000 extra jobs in the average of 10,000 income per home or per person. Now, I note that we're about 5 years, or nearly 5 years, halfway through the strategy, and in the report I didn't actually see the numbers, but I'm just wondering if you can tell me how we're tracking on those indexes.
Look, this is a piece of work that we're continuing to develop over time in terms of the performance around those matrices. However, we're working with Infometrics as a supplier of information. They've recently provided some data sets from March 2013 to March 2017 from the start of the strategy to last year. Basically, across that period, we're looking at around 2,700 jobs that have been created within that period, or roughly probably about 670 jobs per annum. So within that, though, there's probably the devil is in the detail in terms around the pace that's actually changed since the start of the strategy in 2013, where it was actually a decline in job numbers across the city. So over the past 4 years during that period, we've seen a progressive increase. From 2014 was around 0.5%, 2015 1.5%, and we've had some continual growth through there. That's what we're anticipating that we're doing with these measures to get that cumulative growth going through there.
The expectation would, I'm assuming with perhaps the rebuild of a hospital coming on stream,
Yeah.
perhaps before 2023, and we could see a significant uplift towards the end that could still see those tracking online.
Absolutely, and this is part of the measures that we're looking at within Enterprise Dunedin, whether or not it's around developing the tech startups ecosystem in terms of businesses associated with that, whether or not it's focusing on such sectors such as film or other growth sectors. This is where we're trying to enable to actually get that cumulative growth going.
Yep, okay, thank you.
If I could just add to that too, Councillor Lord, we will be looking at doing a full breakdown on where those jobs are generated, and would happily bring that back to EDC for their perusal. Yep.
Councillor O'Malley.
It was actually Councillor Lord's question. So the only thing I'd add to that is and I think you've just answered it, Mr. Christie, can we get those with the updates as we go along so we can watch how we're tracking?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And one of the other pieces of work we'll work with Infometrics on is what their forecasting figures might look like going into the future. So we'll have a look at the past and the future if we can in that report.
Yeah, because the breakdown also has the extra income to go with it as well. So.
Yeah, and we do have economic impact reports on the effects of Cadbury's and the hospital rebuild, so we'll be able to build that in.
Councillor Elder.
A bit like Jim, my question was answered before. The question was, will we workshop or be brought to workshop ideas regarding the Provincial Growth Fund, which is an exciting opportunity for Dunedin?
The short answer is yes. We're just working through the framework around that in terms of how to, not what necessarily the projects would be, but how we could look at that and present that back to government. So the short answer is yes.
Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Liggett, for your report. Thoroughly meaty. Just wondering, I couldn't find it in the report anywhere, but with Chorus winding up their contribution, we know that they've gone above and beyond what they promised with the gig city. But have you got any estimation as to the savings for our ratepayers regarding the installation of the infrastructure and what that would have saved our ratepayers?
Not in a great deal of detail, but we realise that there's been a saving to our ratepayers via the discounted connections that have been associated with the gig rollout. It's something that we're conscious that we think will have actually had probably one of the biggest contributions back within the city in terms of that discounted rate, and probably an enabler in terms of business. We need to do some more modelling around that to understand that. But we're looking at now probably about 9,800 connections in terms of the gig, and at the discounted rate within there, we can probably start extrapolating some of the savings that have been out there for the community and for businesses within there, and the benefit that would actually accrue to the city.
Councillor Vandervis.
Thank you for your answer to Councillor Lord's question regarding the extra jobs. The strategy sets out extra jobs, and you mentioned a figure, I think, of 2,700 jobs created. Does the number created include the jobs that have been lost? We've had Cadbury's, for instance, or whatever, or is the 2,700 figure extra jobs?
No, that's just jobs created over that period.
It's jobs created,
Correct.
So it doesn't count the ones that we've lost?
No.
Okay. Also, the average of $10,000 of extra income for each person in terms of a goal, you're looking at some Infometrics coming back. Can you give us some idea of when we can get some sort of
Sure.
reasonable indication of where these goals are heading? I mean, is it going to be in the next few months or this year? Or?
Yep, I can probably answer that. We're going to be doing a midterm review of the economic development strategy. So as a part of that piece of work, we'll ask the researcher to quantify how many jobs and GDP growth measures as part of that report back. I'd anticipate that should be done within 6 months.
And that will be done in terms of extra jobs rather than just additional jobs created.
I'd need to clarify, but I think the job numbers that Fraser's talking about are net increases in jobs, so that would take account of new minus lost jobs to the cities.
Thank you.
Apologies about that.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologies, I haven't seen the medium to long-term work programme, but now that we're halfway through the time span of this strategy, at what point do we review the goals and measures and aspirations? Or do we wait till 2023 and start then?
No, we're going to do that mid-term review this year. So we're anticipating going out to market to do that evaluation over the next few months. And as I said, that'll include reporting back on activity to date and those key metrics around GDP growth and job growth. So I'd anticipate we should have something back within 6 months as a review of what we've done and also what those priority areas should be and whether there should be any changes to the work program for GDP.
And by GDP, in that
grow
instance,
Dunedin partners.
yeah, it's tricky. And that process will allow for public feedback as to what the community's aspirations and goals might be for economic development.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep. It won't be a full-blown review. That would take a lot longer, but we would anticipate talking to special interest groups and community groups to make sure we have lined that up with council's expectations, and it will come back here.
Any other questions? Not, would someone like to move?
I'm happy to move.
So moved, Councillor Gary, seconded, Councillor Wiley. Any discussion? If not, I'll put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. I'd just like to note at this stage that an apology had been lodged by Councillor Steadman at 12:30, so we missed that in the apologies. Would councillors be happy for us to include him in the apologies for this meeting? Okay, thank you. That brings us on to Dunedin Food Charter. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you.
The floor's both of you have now got the floor.
I'll pick a little bit of it up. The following paper is basically to present the draft food charter for adoption to the Economic Development Committee. This is a piece of work that Ruth has been leading and is also highlighted as a key activity within the Food Resilience Action Plan. So just very briefly, the key intention of the charter is to help enable partnerships between private sector organisations and wider organisations in the delivery of good food Dunedin outcomes. The draft charter has been developed in conjunction with the community. We've taken it for consultation between September and December last year, and it's attached with the report. And at this point, Ruth and I are happy to take any questions regards to it.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question about this, firstly, and it's paragraph 14, just under next steps. If the charter is to be adopted, the DCC will be asked to become the first official signatory, and which would make it a non-binding reference document for decision making. That doesn't seem particularly committed for the first signatory. Is there any reason why why would we not choose to follow it if we adopt it?
Thanks, Councillor Hawkins. Sorry, I'm not clear on your question. Is your question around it being a non-binding document, or? The Charter reflects an aspirational goal, so it's like a vision statement in a way, so it's our blue sky thinking. It's what the community have indicated they want our future food system to look like locally. So it is aspirational, which is why it's non-binding, I guess. Its signatories will be indicating their agreement with the principles of the Charter and their intention to act according to those principles, but we're not going to be holding anybody to account.
I mean, the reason I ask is because it's written at the Charter itself is at quite a high level. It says we will actively find ways, not everything we do will be. So, I mean, committing to it is essentially using it as a reference document, isn't it? Rather than, like, it's not much of a commitment. Because in that it is a high level, it's a high level statement. So for us to not meet this would mean we're doing nothing.
I guess the devil's going to be in the detail of the action plan. So this is, the food charter is intended to be, for us, I think we need to remember that this is a really new project. It's a new concept for the city. Food resilience and having a food charter is a new concept for the city. So this is a first iteration of the charter. There will be an action plan, a revised action plan coming out of this as well, which is where you'll see the details around actual projects that will inform that charter or that will work towards the principles of that charter. So, yeah, I think it's important to remember that we needed to find a balance between being achievable and aspirational, and initially at this stage we were really cautious that we wanted to be inclusive. We need to bring as many people along with us on this project as we can. So it may be that in future we revise the charter and it does become tighter around the aspirations, but for now, this is what the community signalled they wanted.
The action plan that will give effect to this, is the intention that will supersede, because I mean, I've got a question around the broader food resilience action plan and how much of that is progressed and to what degree, but is the intention that the focus of the scope of this work is narrowed to be just delivering on this? No.
No, not at this point, no.
So you're right, the action plan that we are currently developing will supersede the previous one that was approved back before this role was put into place, which obviously if there are actions within there and there aren't very many that we haven't completed yet, they will flow on through to the updated action plan, but that will also include a whole lot of new actions that we know from the work we've done the last 2 years need to be added.
That would be good. I mean, it would be good at some point to get an update on what has been done on that, because it's a great list, all that stuff. So just to be clear, the new action plan will deliver on this, but also the food resilience project more widely than just the charter.
Yes.
And will one of those things be developing an internal food policy?
So we have some documents that would contribute to that already. We have healthy food guidelines within the DCC. We're a signatory to the Fair Trade Cities. We're still working on whether it's appropriate to do something around procurement or other aspects of things that might be relevant to an internal policy, but we have a working group internally around these matters as well that come together as we need them to. So as things works in progress, like the procurement policy currently, then we'll be feeding into that.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you for the report. And I was really delighted to read the food charter as it is, but I have a couple of questions. They may be a bit premature, but perhaps you can just give me an idea of progress. So the two areas I was interested in were how we're going on progress towards smoother pathways for people establishing businesses, food businesses. And, you know, as we know that sometimes there's some obstacles in the way just from a regulatory perspective. Can you just give us a bit of an update on maybe some initiatives that are happening in regards to that? That would be my first question.
Thanks, Councillor Gary. Yes, we next month we're about to start piloting a new format of the business clinic. So at the moment, Enterprise Dunedin run regular business clinics for people with any type of startup idea. And I look after the food-related ones. We're piloting a new format from next month, which will mean that we have myself, an environmental health officer, and the client manager from the Food Innovation Network in one space together. So for that, we're really targeting businesses who are either already established and have an idea for a new product, or a growth initiative underway, or looking for adding some extra element to their business, or startups that already have quite a robust plan and are some way down their business planning. So what it means is that hopefully we can get a whole lot of information to that person in one setting rather than having to come in multiple times. And it's also a way of promoting the Food Innovation Network that's here at the university, which has a goal to increase exports and help develop new products. So we're wanting to get the word out about that project, or that facility, more as well.
So will you kind of be the conduit in amongst those three people? Because I know one of the issues is the people going from person to person and not feeling there's one central person. Will you be the central person?
Yes.
Oh, good. Great. And second question was around a comment on page 34, and I know it's the previous action plan, but I'm just curious to know how we're going in regards to this. As a desirable food destination, it's on page 34. How's that going? It's under Arts and Culture Strategy. Dunedin's food culture and promote the city and surrounding countryside as desirable food destinations.
So we've done bits and pieces of work towards that. For instance, we've launched the new Good Food Dunedin website, and the intention of that was to bring all the information about food in Dunedin into one place, so hopefully that's easier for travellers and tourists to access. We've had a couple of forums with local tourism operators as well, just to see how we can add. We're really conscious that for visitors and tourists, food is becoming a more and more important part of their experience, so we want to capitalise on that. So we have had meetings with tourism operators to see, or to get their thoughts on how we can enhance that aspect of the experience in Dunedin, and that's continuing just on an informal basis at the moment. I'm also working with a number of stakeholders on how we can grow food events and festivals in Dunedin, and the first cab off the rank there is potentially looking at how we strengthen the relationship with the Polytech around the Culinary Arts Conference, which happens every 2 years, which is a huge draw card in itself, and we'd love to bring that experience out to the community more and to visitors to the city.
So does that include craft beer? Do you consider that to be food? I know some people would, but...
Yeah. Yes, we'll include food and beverage. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both. My question is on page 3 of your food resilience piece, just regarding changing land use. It says dairy does not increase food resilience. I was just wondering, and I don't know if anyone can answer this or not, but whether or not there has been provision made in the 2GP to exclude dairy from our fertile soils that we're so hard looking after.
I don't know that we can answer that, sorry, Councillor. We'd have to find out. I'm not aware of it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Part 2, and thank you very much, because I realise that the whole food resilient things is at a very, very early stage, and I think there's a lot of pieces there. I'm looking forward to some of the dots joining up, but I love where it's at so far. Do you envisage the council supporting or encouraging in any way some sort of co-op type arrangement with local growers to enhance our farmers market type arrangement? Is that something that we would...
Look, Councillor O'Neill, we haven't actually actively considered that at the moment, but it could possibly be something that we'll consider in the future. So,
just works elsewhere.
Okay.
Thanks.
We are working with a local businessman currently who has a similar concept, so if we can facilitate that, we'll do so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my question is just to the actual signing document on page 54, I think it is. As you said, this is really an aspirational document, and it's sort of trying to get a motion and a movement going. Mm-hmm. It's a design question. A lot of businesses who sign this would probably like to advertise the fact they had. So I wonder if the business's name was in bigger print, they could actually then put it behind their counter next to their food safety thing and then say that we are part of this. Because I think in terms of getting everybody on board, if the companies themselves can say, oh, you know, I support this and there's my proof of it sitting up on the wall, would be quite helpful.
Yeah, that's absolutely our plan, and what you see before you is my skills on Microsoft Word, so we will get someone to design up something a bit more swanky, and the intention is that businesses will be able to put it on their wall and show that, yeah, they are signatories.
Councillor Fiso.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Kia ora kōrua. Thank you both for your mahi on this issue. I'm looking at page 12 of your report and page 36 of the agenda in regards to supermarkets and the model that currently operates, which makes our food resilience. And I'm thinking particularly in terms of disasters like earthquakes, etc. And I'm reassured slightly by your comment when I asked you during a workshop or after a workshop that supermarkets have a week's supply of groceries or food should we be hit by a major earthquake. So in terms of the work plan, what progress has been made in terms of lobbying the supermarkets to change their model, if at all, in terms of distribution, having a distribution centre here in Dunedin rather than Christchurch?
We haven't done any work with the supermarkets around that so far. Certainly that's something that we can look at. Yeah.
Councillor Elder.
Hi, thank you for that. Thank you, Chair. Just one couple of questions. Under Parks and Reserves and Community Gardens, it has been brought up before, and I know people who have community gardens pay rates for those community gardens. So has there been any further discussion on rates relief for community gardens, given they do community good?
We're working through a piece on community gardens at the moment, just trying to streamline the process and certainly make it more visible so that we can promote that as an opportunity. That's a conversation that I am having with Parks. There's a bit of work in the background to do around that about ensuring that we can make that consistent across the board.
Oh,
so it's a work in progress.
And the other question is, have we got on the Facebook page or whatever, current sort of local food producers like the peanut butter guys, for example, Ocho, and those stories of local food producers?
They sit across various places, so some of that information will be on the Dunedin NZ website or on Insiders, and as well as obviously the Good Food Dunedin website as well, and the Farmers Market.
Cool, thank you.
No other questions? Would someone like to move? Oh, Councillor Vandervis.
On page 27, you're talking about the cost of food, and you quoted 2009 New Zealand food prices as rising faster than most OECD countries. 2009 is almost a decade ago now. Are we still operating on 10-year-old information?
This is a discussion document that was developed back in 2013 as part of the scoping project before this project kicked off. So that informed this position being put in place, but no, we wouldn't be working off that data.
Okay, yeah, I was a part of the 2013 group that was that eventually ticked off this this new area, and then it was, as I understood it, to be a reaction against the potential for peak oil making transport unaffordable and food becoming unaffordable as well. And that's why it was called food resilience. Now, from what I hear, it seems to have morphed more into a sort of culinary tourism promotion from what you've been saying. How do you go from food resilience to becoming a proponent of culinary tourism?
I wouldn't say it's morphed into that. There are three quite distinct elements to the food resilience project. One is looking at economic development. One is looking at the environmental aspects of food resilience. So that's more what you're talking about, looking at the face of climate change and potentially natural disasters. And then there's the social aspect as well, which is around food poverty and food insecurity. So it's definitely still included under the mandate of the Good Food Dunedin project. A lot of that work around the more environmental aspects sits at a higher strategic level, for instance in the 2GP, where we look at safeguarding our high-class soils. So it's definitely still part of the current mandate.
Even if it wasn't originally?
No, I think it always has been.
Food tourism
Oh, food
certainly
tourism.
wasn't.
Yes, it's in the yeah, it is.
Okay. On page 54, we've got this charter, and it has 3 principles of good food, which are surprisingly good for people, good for the city, and good for the planet. And this is what you hope that we're going to sign up to. What do you see as the ratepayer value in us signing up to what's been, I think, a 34-page document, basically coming to the conclusion that food's got to be good? I mean, what is the value in signing up to this for the ratepayers who've paid a lot of money for this very extensive report?
We see that there's a number of parts to this. One is around setting the aspiration. The Charter is setting a degree of aspiration where a group of organisations that Ruth has been working with over the last 12 months, 24 months, and businesses can actually set out their intent, if you like, in terms of where they see good food Dunedin sitting. We see that it's also beneficial for companies and businesses that do sign up to it from a ratepayer point of view to actually signal that they're meeting consumer or customer demand within there as well. And that's one of the fundamental things that we think we can shine a light over that and indicate that it's indicating that businesses are meeting that consumer choice within there as well. Ruth, is there anything else?
I think it's just worth noting too that the appendix that you're referring to as being part of the large report was a historic piece of work that Council undertook before the food resilience position took place as part of Enterprise Dunedin team. That is here as by way of background so that councillors are informed about the project so that they have the full context and the recommendation that they sign up to the food charter. So we haven't spent a lot of time on developing new material.
Yeah, I could tell that from the cut and paste and generic strategy references all the way through. My next question is Zynat, is it? Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm...
Zynat.
Zynat's correct. You've said that this is what the community signal they wanted, and you've approached specific groups, and you've talked about customer demand. But surely isn't 99% of customer demand basically catered by supermarkets? Isn't that where people are putting their money? I mean, you're saying all these other things here, but surely in terms of food resilience, the supermarkets are already doing a completely adequate job, are they not?
Yes, they are, but I guess what customers or what the community is saying is that they're interested in a different model. People are increasingly...
Even when 99% of them go to the supermarket?
Yeah, that's the way the current food system operates, but what the community are telling us are that they're interested in a different food system, one that is more conscious of local producers, the impact on the environment, those that still don't have enough to eat. So people are responding to what is currently available in the current model that's running, but we're responding to consumers that are saying that we want something a little bit different.
So where are you finding these consumers that are not happy with the supermarket model?
So we've developed a partnership model across Dunedin, which includes a really wide range of stakeholders, and those that are outlined in the report are only just a snapshot of those that are involved. So we have a group that represents every aspect of the food system, from production and manufacture right through to waste and recycling. And they all represent their own communities when they come along to that group as well. And it's also...
Can you give us some examples of who these they are?
Sorry?
Can you keep mentioning they and the community. I'm keen to know who these people are.
That belong to our partnership group?
Yes.
So some of them are outlined in that document. We've got various departments of the university. We have various social sector agencies such as Presbyterian Support, Anglican Family Care, used to be Connect South, and I can't remember what they're called now. The health sector's involved, the education sector's involved. We have just local individuals who are passionate foodies. We have growers. I I can forward you a list. It has actually been sent to this committee previously, but I can forward you a list of those stakeholders if you'd like.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. Much obliged.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for Councillor Vandervis's benefit, maybe, can you clarify that, or confirm at least, that every stage of this work has been progressed as a result of a resolution of council and resourced as a result of a resolution of council?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Elder.
Thanks for all your work. What do you see in the future? I mean, there are actually economic benefits in this strategy. What do you see the economic benefits being?
So, as we discussed, the food resilience activity's got multiple aims and goals, economic being one of them. So within the focus around that, we've seen events being progressed, such as the Night Noodle Market, which was promoting the city as a destination and also providing an opportunity for local suppliers and businesses to be associated with a wider event. We have started some discussions with thinking around food tourism opportunities associated with that. We still need to do more thinking around this, and this is stuff that we want to do obviously in the coming year, to think around those opportunities and equally balance them back with the environmental and the social considerations under the program as well.
Thank you.
Councillors, any other questions? If not, would someone like to move? Moved Councillor Benson-Pope, seconded Councillor Gary. Any discussion? Councillor Vandervis.
First of all, it would be nice to know which option he moved. We're not completely taking for granted that it's always going to be the recommended one, are we? But assuming, as usual, that it's the recommended option.
Yes.
I, again, am going to be consistent and vote against any further rates monies going towards food resilience. When food resilience was first floated, and for Councillor Hawkins' benefit, I have been a councillor throughout this rather torturous process and recognise that all the steps of it have been resourced as a resolution of council, and that we have got to the stage of producing these voluminous reports as a result of council recommendations. I, however, have consistently voted against them because I consider this line of bureaucracy to be a waste of ratepayers' money. The food resilience panic was basically initiated, as I understand it, by Councillor McTavish on the back of the peak oil panic, where Councillor McTavish was able to convince the council of the time that oil was soon to become unaffordable, and that's why we all had to have cycle lanes and had to go to bicycles, and that food would similarly become unaffordable, and that's why we had to have a food resilience strategy. These strategies have ended up costing this council and the ratepayers of this city inordinate amounts of money, the cycleways fiascos in particular. And the oil peak panic hasn't happened. The price has gone down rather than up. And similarly, the unaffordability of food and everyone having to grow their own hasn't happened either. So whereas I don't see this as a complete waste, as I believe that there is some value in promoting culinary tourism, let's call it culinary tourism, and let's focus on actually doing that rather than pretending that we have a food resilience problem. I could go for a drainage resilience paper. I'd love to see a report on drainage resilience. I could go for a parking resilience policy. Again, this is, I think, a real policy, something we could actually get some value from. But food resilience, in my opinion, has been, from its inception, misconceived. It's been essentially promulgated on the basis of food price increases that have never happened, And therefore, I believe we are in a situation here of looking at many, many pages of documentation that is of really no value to the ratepayer at all. It's not that I don't think culinary tourism and local companies like Ocho are not worth supporting. I think all well and good, but let's support them as economic development. Let's not pretend that food resilience is a problem that this council needs to grapple with, and it's for this reason that I will be voting against, yet again, for consistency, more ratepayer money wasted on such reports. Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
I won't be voting against this. Well, I'll be voting for option 1 because option 2 is actually the opposite of option 1. I guess what I'd like to say is that often as not, as something goes forward in council, it does slightly change its direction, and I actually want to take my hat off to staff for saying that you have filled out voids in things that were absent in what the Economic Development Unit were offering. And a good example would be with the business development assistance. You're effectively offering the red carpet equivalent to everything associated with food production in the city. So I don't see this having wandered off into nowhere land. I think, in fact, what it is that you've taken on extra tasks that are complementary to and consistent with the whole idea of what was being done here. Additionally, we're often reminded that this city has very large boundaries, of which large parts of it are rural, food production being one of the major production events in the rural area. So I think, again, this is consistent with greater city needs and desires. So I want to compliment you on what you've done to date. I like this particular motion that we're adopting right now because I think it allows businesses to get involved, and I do believe it has a direct economic impact as well as a community impact. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank staff for the work they've done. It's been quite a process to get here, largely due to the less than ideal level of resourcing that has been allocated to this work by this body, and we're responsible for that. But it is good to see such an aspirational document be produced as part of this food resilience program. I think what I like about this work is that it does, while it has to sit somewhere, so it reports to the Economic Development Committee, it does deliver on a lot of council's strategic priorities. Some of them are economic, and some of them are social, and some of them are environmental. It's the whole point, I thought, of the strategic framework that council adopted and has been developing for the best part of a decade now, and it's great to see projects deliver that. Deliver across that and cut across that in the way that this does, and I look forward to seeing it evolve. I find it remarkable, though, to be told that we shouldn't be progressing that because it was adopted, and we set off down this path because we were told that food would become unaffordable, and that 99% of people in our community are well served by supermarkets. And where are these people, we are asked, for whom this system doesn't work? Well, they might not be in Roslyn, but they certainly do exist in our communities. You see them in queues at food banks because the supermarket system does not serve all people in our community well. Food is unaffordable. All of this is set out in the document. Its length has been opined upon. I wish it had been read more thoroughly, perhaps, from either when it was first put out 5 years ago or when it was more recently appended to this paper. So I'm saddened that the needs of all of our community and the desire we might have for all of our community to have access to an affordable and resilient food supply can be so flippantly diminished and dismissed by people around this table. It is of utmost importance that we progress this work. I'd love to see it better resourced so that it could be done more quickly, and perhaps we'll have the opportunity to discuss that through the 10-year plan process and hearings through April and May. So thanks again to Ms. Zinert and Mr. Liggett for bringing this to us, and I look forward to seeing this work progress. Thank you.
Councillor Laufiso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to reiterate my thanks and congratulations to you, particularly Ruth, for your work on this ongoing piece of work. And at the workshop held last year, I did express my concern that not all residents already have easy access to nutritious food, as Councillor Hawkins has talked about our food banks. And I will be I just want to thank you for taking into account that and changing it to advocacy for those people that cannot afford food. So I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Confessions of a neglectful gardener. This year I forgot to sow any courgettes, so I went to the supermarket because apparently that's where I go and get food. And I have to say that as much as I love to have tourists coming in from Australia, the fact that they only serve courgettes from Australia during one of the best growing seasons, I think it epitomises what's wrong with the current model. And so I'm delighted to see this work progress. It wasn't just one day. I have to say that I haven't bought a courgette from the supermarket yet. I've gone without on that basis, but it is continuing to be, that is the default. Import the cheapest stuff, which isn't necessarily, I mean, when we could be creating jobs here locally, and we have to be mindful of that sort of stuff. So I'm delighted that you're pursuing this work, and I'm sure that the inputs will change, things will change, the markets will change and what you need to react to, but you've got the flexibility in here and you've got a great team that you're working with to see what the opportunities are. So I will be supporting this motion.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to join the chorus of support and thank you for your work on this. I note that it isn't a voluminous report, it's 2 pages. There's an old report attached, but it shows to me great vision, and I congratulate the former council for that, who started the work. And I really appreciate how nimble the staff have been in relation to this. 2 things I just want to mention. The support it's given you for food businesses in the city, and I appreciate we have a bit of work to do with that yet, but those food clinics sound fantastic, and we do have new food businesses. And the other is around climate change. I live in a community often cut off, and the supplies of food is, it's often a short-term thing, but I can recall an occasion when we're 4 days cut off. That is not unusual where I live, and having enough food and emergency supplies and so forth is of concern. And as climate change kicks in, as it is, that is top of mind on each of those occasions. So I congratulate you for your work, and I will be supporting the motion.
I also will be voting in favour of this resolution, and I think if you look at it, what is so wrong with trying to encourage greater food production around our city? At any time, and for any natural disaster, we could end up with our main food source, which is coming down State Highway 1, being lost. In my days as a schoolboy, I worked on market gardens. The Taieri was covered in market gardens. So I think to encourage greater food production in our area, it will enhance the resilience of the city, which is what was intended. It will provide opportunity for employment. It will provide potentially better food sources, because in the case of some foods, we don't know their history. They come from offshore. And I think there's a growing demand. I was Farmers Market this past weekend. It's still jam-packed. That indicates to me that there are plenty of people who are looking for an alternative. And in terms of food, of the affordability of food, some of the suburban gardens that are being established now produce amazing amounts of food. And I've had an association with the garden in North East Valley, and had food from that garden, interestingly enough, and plants to plant in my own garden. So I think encouraging those sorts of activities, which is what this does, is good for our city. Councillor Newell.
Thank you very much, Chair. Same. Thank you very much, both of you, for the report. As I say, I enjoyed the fact there's a lot of pieces to it, and the fact that it's a relatively embryonic work, and obviously we can look forward to those dots being joined. Very much in favour of the co-op type arrangement with local growers producing good local food, and obviously hiring local people as well. So, yeah, and any enhancing we can do of our farmers market, still the best in the country and celebrating 15 years recently. So thank you very, very much for your work and look forward to it. And I'll be voting in favour. Thank you.
So there's no other speakers. I will put it. All in favour? Yep. Oh, sorry. Councillor Benson-Pope.
Just briefly in reply, I'd like to also congratulate the staff for doing what council asked them by resolution to do and doing their work very thoroughly. I think there's a large number of useful initiatives and elements to the report that this community will be very well served by and will enjoy finding out about, actually. It's not just about some of the big issues that have been traversed around the table, it's also about helping people rediscover skills that are sort of largely lost in lots of parts of our community. And I think it's unfortunate that we have a sole naysayer, but I guess that's the way of it, and the need for headlines. So congratulations on your work, and I'm looking forward to this as it progresses.
All right, I'll put it. All in favour? Against? Division has been called for.
Aye. Councillor Benson-Pope.
Aye.
Councillor Hall.
Aye.
Aye.
Councillor Lord.
Aye.
Councillor Vandervis.
No.
Councillor Elder. Aye. Councillor Festo.
Aye.
Councillor Gary.
Aye.
Is there any discussion? If not, I'll put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. Welcome, team. Do you want to do an intro? Yep.
So just by way of introduction, councillors, the Dunedin Destination Plan is an implementation plan that sits under the Dunedin Economic Development Strategy, and it has that vision for Dunedin to be a compelling destination. The plan has been through a public consultation process following the resolution of Council on the 25th of March 2017 to commence consultation and engagement on the draft plan. Following the close of that submission process and due to the level of interest from the community, it was decided to appoint a hearings panel to give submitters an opportunity to speak to their submission. The hearings panel have worked with staff to incorporate where possible the suggestions and recommendations made by submitters. I must also note that information that was captured as part of that process that didn't make it into the final plan will be advanced separately by Enterprise Dunedin or other departments of council. You will also note that from the hard copy you received, there is a variation in some of the photos. That is the change that we would expect may take place as we just adopt a couple of final photos for the printed version that will go out should you adopt this plan today. Happy to take questions on the plan.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Lefiso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I note that under the summary of expectations that Kaitahuki, Otago and the Māori Participation Working Party have been engaged with. And I'm just recalling, I'm not sure if this is even, it's kind of from left field, but I'm noting that a lot of us were at Ulverston for the landmarks thing. And I'm just wondering, to me, and I could be wrong, but there doesn't seem to be any reflection in the destination plan of tangata whenua or kaitahu or stuff like that? Thank you.
We did, through the consultation process, try to engage heavily to make sure that that was reflected. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of feedback from some of the groups in response to that consultation. We are mindful of it, and we certainly do want to be working with all local groups in terms of making sure that we incorporate that into the final plan, and we'd expect to be doing so, particularly around the next phase of work, which will be developing some of our operational strategies, including the way we'll market the city as part of that. So we would expect to be engaging a lot more heavily with those groups, with your groups.
Councillor Elder.
Across the world, there's a huge growth in adventure tourism, and Dunedin has 40 top surfing beaches, mountain biking and walking tracks. I was just wondering where that fits in the strategy, because that's a market that's growing, but also has benefit for local people in terms of health and wellbeing.
Certainly, look, it's a good question. We anticipate that work will be done as the next phase when we look at the audiences that we'll be marketing to and what those key messages will be. So it sits quite neatly within this destination plan. It is incorporated in there, but you'll see the actual results of that when we do develop the marketing plan, which will also come back for discussion at council.
And another question, on page 25 of the destination, it says about developing capacity and connectivity. Under the first statement, build capacity and efforts to attract further inbound national and international flights, cruise, rail. There is an increasing number of people who use the Alps to Ocean, and a lot of people are now cycling around New Zealand, and I was just wondering whether there's the possibility of adding cycle to that. That's on page 25 of the destination plan.
Yeah, I think we were looking mostly at the major ports where they would enter into the country. So obviously, from a cruise perspective, we can be the first port of entry. The direct airline services into our airport are a high priority for us. I certainly wouldn't discount cycling. I think it's a very important way that people can get to our city, and you're quite right, cycling is a growing market, one we're very aware of, and one that we will look to incorporate into our marketing plan to make sure that we do capture that.
Thank you.
Councillor Vandervis.
My compliments again on the superb photos that seem to keep getting better, certainly a lot better than they were when we were promoting ourselves 10 years ago. To me, all of them are photos well worth looking at. The question I have regards the second photo, which is on page 60, showing a kayaker, and the potential for adventure tourism that Councillor Elder has brought up in the Matakana Caves. The Matakana Caves have been recently surveyed and found to be the largest sea caves in the world. Sea cavers are actually quite a numerous bunch that travel the world, and access to our sea caves has apparently been restricted, not as it usually is just by tides and weather, but by DOC and I think New Zealand Ministry of Ministry, I forget which ministry it is now. Anyway, they've basically put so many safety caveats around taking people into the caves that I understand that nobody is actually able to be taken there now. I mean, you can go off your own bat, but there was a business hoping to set up from Karitani. I'm wondering if it's possible for us to look at the enormous cost in getting all the paperwork done to actually allow a tourism business to get people access to the Matakana Caves. First of all, because if this was able to be done, it would be a much safer way for people to see the caves rather than just attempting to do it off their own bats currently, as is currently the case. And second of all, it's simply a unique string to our bow that I believe could develop into a considerable industry all of its own. It may even be possible to access the caves by a tunnel were that to be dug quite a bit inland, because these caves go for several kilometres inland apparently. So if it's possible to look at the bureaucratic impediments that currently prevent this amazing attraction from being visited, would it be possible for you to actually come back to us with some idea of how these might be circumvented?
Very happy to look at that, Councillor. We are very aware of the need for more tourism product development as part of the development of this plan. So that would fit very nicely into this. It's complementary, and it's certainly something we can take away and have a look at and come back with some further information to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm looking forward to the marketing plan to come back for this, because I'm quite interested in the narrow casting and segmentation and messages, because to try and do all of this for all people would be impossible, even if we had the resourcing to be able to deliver it. But the marketing plan won't cover all of what, it won't operationalise, if you like, all of the goals that we have here. So I'm interested in things like, for example, event spread, and the idea that we want to have events throughout the year. How are you going to encourage that? I mean, it's difficult. I mean, people hold events when it's busy. So to convince someone to hold an event where it's not busy, because we want there to be spread of events, how are we going to encourage people to do that? How do you actively try and make that happen?
It's an ongoing challenge, I think, Councillor. We certainly, through the development of this Dunedin Destination Plan, have looked at working with a number of outside agencies, partners that we believe could be instrumental in helping us get those key messages out there, and also to be getting that spread of visitors into our city. So it is about managing our city as a destination, both in messaging and in the running of events and other types of activities that we'll have. We can't be the only deliverer of this. We don't have enough resource, and to be quite frank, we shouldn't be delivering it all on our own. So this is a partnership document, and we would want the community to be participating in its delivery where they can and where it's appropriate.
Thank you. And just one more, picking up on Councillor Lawfisol's point, your one or two photos that you still have to come for this document when it's finally printed, will any of them have brown faces in them?
We can certainly look to change some of the photos to incorporate that, yes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Actually, my question goes back a bit further, and that's there was a council resolution that said that when we formed the committee to hear this, there'd be a fourth person on the committee from the community. Can you tell me what happened to that fourth person and why they didn't make it onto the committee?
Yes, quite simply, we did make an approach to a fourth person, but due to the timeliness and availability of that person, they weren't available. And we were at the point where we were starting to hear submissions before we were able to get another person on board. So just from a practical point of view, we only went with the three councillors.
Did you bring that back to any committee to say that you weren't be able to get that fourth person?
No, we didn't, but I think the resolution was such, and I'd need to check it, that it was discretionary for them to be able to appoint up to a fourth.
It was confirmed that it was not discretionary, actually, and I remember that at the point of doing the actually doing the motion, Councillor Benson-Pope did it, and that was the question that was being asked, was it was discretionary or not discretionary, and it was clarified that it was not discretionary, okay. that the fourth person would be appointed. So it's just a case of I would like to know basically how that went along, and as it related, I'm not saying that people deliberately didn't put that fourth person on, but I was strongly of the opinion that we were actually stating definitely a fourth person on that committee.
Yeah, look, my apologies. We can check that. It'd be fair to say we were very keen to get a private sector contribution onto that hearings panel, and as I say, it was just around timeliness that didn't happen, and we will go back and check the resolution just to be clear on that.
Thanks very much. Now to the report. free and independent travellers, I'm having trouble finding them in this destination plan. Where are they captured?
I don't think they're specifically referred to in the document, but they're incorporated in the whole of the visitor sector. And they're an important part of it, Councillor.
Okay. And also, how are we prioritising the actions of this plan? I guess my question is it semantics to call this a plan or a strategy document? Because as a plan, you would have implementation order, and then you would have like who you expect your partners to be. Whereas as a strategy, you would say, I'm globally trying to go in this area and this is where I'm heading. So it still has a bit of a feeling of a strategy document rather than a plan document. So I guess in terms of that, what is the order in which you plan to execute this document?
It's all subject to it being signed off, of course, by council, but we would look to apply the resources where we see the greatest needs, and that's come back by way of some of the feedback from the submitters. For example, the insights part of this work would see as a high priority. It's got significant advantages for us to be able to undertake that work reasonably quickly. We would look to priority order some of the work that's in here. And I guess it's the only constraint around that is how quickly we can move, in terms of what resource we have available to action it, and where we can get that community input where it's also required.
Thanks. And then you raised a very valid point that obviously council's not going to be able to do all of this. And again, where in each of these action items do you see the partner organisations, and could we see who those partner organisations will be for each of these actions that are on there?
Yep, some of the hearings panel may wish to address that, but we did start by looking at putting names of organisations beside each of the actions, and we realised that they incorporate a lot of different organisations, so we listed them all at the back, and even that is not as comprehensive as it could or should be. We think we've got a lot of organisations that are willing to contribute to a variety of actions in there, and we will be approaching as many of them as we can on those individual projects.
Would you agree, though, that if they're not put next to an action, there's no organisation next to that action? So
Yeah, there is that. I guess the minute you put a name beside it, it implies they're going to take some sort of responsibility for it, and it excludes others. And I think the discussion that we had is we wanted to be as inclusive as possible in terms of those that might want to participate in the delivery of some of those actions.
But this is a plan. It's not a strategy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got to sometimes say, we plan on doing this, so we plan on working with these people. I guess my feedback is still, I'll wait for discussions to give my feedback. Thank you.
Just to clarify, we had a feedback session to stakeholders. We did it in 2 groups, and at that we made it quite clear that if any of them wanted to have an involvement in any particular activity that was listed, all they had to do was let us know. So, Councillor van der Walt.
Picking up on Councillor O'Malley's point and looking at your proposed future activity page, which is page 90 in our agenda, there are 6 bullet points there. All of them are entirely generic and could apply to any city in the world. In fact, they probably do apply to any city in the world. Are there any specifics regarding proposed future activity? Or is the proposed future activity simply the very generic 6 bullet points as on page 90?
Yeah, look, so to answer that, simply they were ones that didn't fit under the other agreed action areas that we've got in the document, but we didn't want to exclude them from future work. So we captured them by putting them under this section to say these are important. They were brought up as part of the submission and feedback process. We wanted to record that so that we could be looking at working on them in the future, but they're not captured as part of our priority work order for those initial actions.
Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just had a question. I wondered if Mr. Christie could just outline, because one of the issues for the hearings panel was around timeliness, and Councillor O'Malley touched on that briefly in the question he asked. and process. And I just wondered if Mr Christie could comment on the exhaustive process it was in the end, from when Council made the resolution in March to where we are today. And if you could just touch on the various parts of that process, I think that might be helpful.
Yep, so the draft document was put out. We had a period of time where submitters could prepare their written submissions for consideration. We had a number of those, 44 submissions in writing, and a significant number of people that wanted to come along and speak to those submissions. The hearings panel met over a day and a half to hear those submissions, verbal submissions, and engage with the community around their responses to some of the questions that they had. From that point, the hearings panel went into a number of days of deliberations to ensure that the submitters' views and recommendations were captured in the final document. The document, as most of you will have known from the early draft, is a significant rewrite and change as a result of those contributions, for which we're very grateful to the community for their input. And that, I guess, has culminated in a review back to some of those stakeholders in the last few weeks. So it's been, whilst it has been a long time, it has been quite an intensive process of community engagement, which was essential to ensure that we got to a plan whereby we can have more than just the City Council owning it. It has to be owned and delivered by those partners, which is an important aspect of this.
So just to clarify, is it correct that we had, as I recall, we had extended the submission period, the deadline, is that correct?
Yes, we did extend that to allow for some additional submission time.
And the other question would be around the thoroughness of the process in terms of, I mean, my memory was about page by page to check that we had captured everything.
It was page by page, paragraph by paragraph, and word by word.
Yeah. And how would you gauge the quality of the submissions from the community?
Look, the submissions were varied from a lot of different interest groups, and really valuable in terms of being able to capture things that we'd missed in the first draft. Strangely, we'd missed the fact that we're the UNESCO City of Literature. And it was just something that we completely missed putting in the document. It's obviously important. So things that we were able to pick up through that process were hugely valuable in getting us to where we are. And we probably have got areas where we could continue to improve it. We see this document as a work in progress. Whilst it may or may not be adopted today, we see this as just a stake in the ground in terms of work we need to do to give some certainty to our community in terms of where we're moving in this space.
Thank you, and I have two other questions. The decision not to put any metrics in and any groups in, we had them in and we had them out, as I recall, and that was to ensure that the document wasn't dated by the time it was. Is that, have I got a correct memory on that?
Yep, so the metrics are very difficult in that there's actually a whole section devoted to capturing all of the right data that we need to be measuring, and that in itself is a comprehensive project. If we had have waited to that to have been completed before we produce this document, you'd probably be at least 6 months from now because of the timeliness around the reporting on those documents.
And my final question, what would be the time frame on getting the marketing plan done? Because that's an annual matter, and obviously everyone's going to be looking towards that now once this is signed off by council.
I would like to think we could bring back an update to the next Economic Development Committee meeting in terms of time frame for that, but I'd be anticipating within the next 6 months we should have that completed.
Any other questions, councillors?
I'm happy to move.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Gary, seconded by Councillor Wiley. Yeah. So we will open it for debate, councillors. Anybody wish? Councillor O'Malley.
I think as a strategy document, I think this is a fine document, and I think I'm just caught around the semantics of strategy versus plan. If I would expect in a plan document to have prioritisation of action and action points, and Therefore, I think it's a good strategy document, and maybe we should change the name to Dunedin Destination Strategy. But as a plan, I feel it's missing the action points, which would be the issue I would have. Thank you. I'll still vote for it, though.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Christie and Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to commend this iteration of this document relative to the one that was presented to us before it went through the public feedback process. It's really heartening to see a better articulation of the offering of the city for residents and the quality of life offering for residents in the city. Whether that's our arts and culture sector, which is obviously going from strength to strength, or the seriousness with which the city takes environmental issues, which is certainly increasingly a factor for people who have the ability to choose where they want to live, or indeed justify their long distance travel if their destination is something that takes this more seriously. I think both of those things are core elements of our city's brand, and I look forward to that being reflected in the subsequent marketing plan. I think the thing that is most disappointing really is the deafening absence of mana whenua in this document, and whether you're concerned about our obligations under Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or from a more market-driven perspective, whether you see the opportunity and the point of difference that Aotearoa New Zealand offers as a bicultural nation. I think it's an extraordinary oversight for that to be absent to the degree that it is. I got really excited when I saw the idea that we might be looking at bilingual street names, but it turns out we're going to be translating them into Chinese, not into Te Reo Māori, which is disappointing. And the photos, as I pointed out, we've got a kayaker, some cyclists, the stadium, penguins, some East Asian community, albatross, graffiti, tourists, cruise ships, and graduates. And I understand that at this point, rewriting the document isn't something that is available to us, but it would be good, at least in its presentation, to nod towards mana whenua in the way that this is presented. I think we've made some really positive steps in the way that we present our documentation as a council. The 10-year plan consultation document is real progress. So it's disappointing, I guess, really after that to be presented with this. So that's my only remaining piece of constructive feedback, I suppose, and I look forward to, at least in the next financial year, having greater staff resource to be able to help us do that. I appreciate that the offer and the invitation for feedback went out to the local runaka, and it's been said that they didn't avail themselves of that opportunity, but I don't think it's good enough to expect them to come to us necessarily. I think we need to show a bit more leadership in that area. Thanks.
Councillor Gary.
I just want to comment, first of all, on the amazing amount of work that occurred, and particularly to thank Sarah for her work. She was thrown at the deep end at the start. She was, on day one, was writing as we deliberated, so an extraordinary amount of work there. I'm really proud of this document and the exhaustive and thorough process we went through. We're not going to have agreement from everybody. I'm very aware of that, but we did try very hard to include everybody and to ensure that we talk to the community. And I think for me, a week before Christmas, we called in the key stakeholders, some of the key stakeholders, obviously difficult at that time of year, and just to check that we hadn't missed any glaring pieces out. We then brought them in yesterday, and it was very short notice because we only had a window between when the agenda came out and today to present as we had agreed to the stakeholders. Of course, with that short notice, that doesn't mean everyone's able to get there. And the feedback was on the whole particularly positive and constructive. I think the thing that impressed me, and I sat through the hearings with my colleagues and we listened really, really carefully. For me, it was the range of submissions, the quality of the submissions that was outstanding in this regard. And I felt really confident and feel very confident that we have captured the nuances of those submissions. In terms of Treaty of Waitangi, on page 7 we mention that, and on page 28 we mention kaitahu several times. I absolutely understand the comments my colleagues have made, and in going into the marketing plan, I'm sure that we can improve on that. We can always do better. The photos, we have the ability, and we have changed a few of those out, and we said when we came today that there was an opportunity to change some of the photos out. So I believe this is a really good document. I mean, the moment that we pass it, it's going to be out of date. It's a work in progress, something that is going to be a starting point. I look forward to the marketing plan. This has been a very long, exhaustive process, an exhausting process, and certainly I would acknowledge the level of frustration in the community. A lot of our community don't understand local government processes, and I will say that we did have some scheduling difficulties. There was no doubt about that. So I will be supporting, obviously, as I moved it, and thank the staff for their considerable effort to get us to this point, and to the community.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, point of order. The mover didn't speak at the initial point. She's just spoken again. That must be the right of reply.
I think you are probably right.
But I'm happy to hear Councillor White's wisdom, but I was just trying to perceive if there was a problem.
I think, given that Councillor Gary has spoken, that I will hold up that and we will put it to the vote. Given that so far most councillors have spoken in favour. So the resolution should read, recommends to Council that it adopt the Dunedin Destination Plan. So we are recommending to Council, not adopting it at this meeting. So I'll put it all in favour. No. Against? No. Carried. And that brings us to items for consideration by the Chair. Are there any? If not, we will have Councillor Elder.
I would just like to speak to what I talked about before, in that I would like to see consideration given working with DOC and Parks and Rec for a stronger outdoor adventure kind of platform, and maybe sectors working together on the outdoor recreation strategy, because we have got amazing scenery, we have got amazing tracks, we have got amazing mountain bike tracks, we've got amazing surfing beaches, and I just see this as an area of growth in tourism, and potentially quite a huge amount of growth, and quite often really people who spend a lot of money. The reason I know is my daughter sends her mountain bike to Europe to bike around Europe. They spend many days there and they spend a lot of money, and so it's a growing market, and I would just, I'm just putting it out there, that's all. Just an exploration of that.
Okay, well, I think probably what you're trying to express is that you want to see it incorporated in the marketing plan, and that it's just been confirmed that will be the case.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, That brings us to the close of this meeting. 5 minutes to change chairs, and the next meeting will get underway.